And this is a celebration that we call it, but it's a celebration that we wish would never have happened. But as they say, between death and taxes, you can't run from them. We're never going to celebrate Tax Day, but we're going to celebrate Norman today. We're going to ask a number of the family members to come up and say a few words, and a few friends to do so also. But I want to thank, on Brenda's behalf, a few people that have gone out of their way to be with Norman over the years and to make this celebration really important and really significant. First, Denny and Jean, we all know how much Norman loved cars. We all know how much he loved his Ferrari. And so it was only fitting that there'd be a Ferrari Mondial here, similar to the one that Norm had, and we really want to thank Denny and Jean for bringing one over. And Norman would not have been happy if there wasn't a Ferrari here. I also want to do a special thank to Mary and Johnny. Raise your hands over there, Mary and Johnny. Mary and Johnny were Norman's caregivers for many, many months. He loved them, and they loved him. And their professionalism and their love for him helped him to get through the last many months when he was beginning to fail. And they were just very, very special to him, and they're very, very special to us. So a hand for I couldn't go home tonight if, on Brenda's behalf, I didn't recognize my wife, Cindy. Seen her in days or weeks. She's been helping to prepare for this for several weeks now, and it was just a love fest for her to be able to do it. We were very, very close to Norman and to Brenda over the years, and this meant a lot to me that she helped to do all this. It meant a lot to Brenda also. So that's the reason I love you, honey. So, there's a couple others. We're going to start with calling up a few people. When we're finished with that, we're going to pass out shot glasses with Norman's favorite bourbon, Angel's Envy. And for those of you who don't drink, you'll get something that looks like bourbon. Cindy's prepared a PowerPoint slideshow and a little thing at the end, which is remarkable. We're going to play it, and at the end of that, we're going to toast to Norm. So be prepared for that as we come to an end today to do that. And I'm not sure who we have prepared to pass the shots around, but I'm sure somebody's going to do that. So we're going to start with Sarah, Norm's daughter. Where are you, Sarah? Sarah! Come on down.
Well, this would be a lot easier if I was just welcoming you all to Alaska Airlines, but proud member of the One World Alliance. I had a lot that I was going to write, but I just decided to just share a few of my favorite memories of my dad. Sort of in no particular order, but when I was a baby, my dad discovered that I loved puzzles, and so he would come home almost every night from work with a new puzzle, and I know he relished watching me figure out how to put those together. I know he loved that I was spelling at 18 months. I think he was pretty proud of that. His nickname for me was Pooh Girl, and not what you might be thinking. I wore footed Winnie the Pooh pajamas. So unfortunately, people who are not privy to the origin of that nickname may have wondered why that was my nickname. Of course, everybody knows my dad drove a Ferrari and loved that Ferrari, but maybe some of you don't remember his Morgan, which is the car that I grew up with. So my dad had spent endless hours tinkering in the garage on that car. There were some expletives said, but anybody who knew my dad would not be surprised by that. But yes, it was always fun to ride around the neighborhood, or anywhere really in Oregon, because you got endless looks from gawkers and people just mesmerized by the car, because it was not your typical car that you would see driving around, really anywhere, but particularly Salinas. School years, my dad was always willing to stay up half the night if need be to break out his India ink and his stencil set to help me perfect a project. And this was before, for those of you who are young and in school, before you could just go online and just manufacture your report. We had the best photos of any kids in the neighborhood, and any of friends we had. My dad was a photographer and enthusiast, and I look at our photo albums now, and I mean, we all have digital cameras, and our kids all have, 1,000 photos, but I think my photos from the 70s and 80s are holding pretty solid compared to people's who are, turning yellow and looking pretty crappy. My favorite activity with my dad growing up was cycling. My dad was an avid cyclist, and we got into cycling when I was about 8 years old, and I don't know too many dads that would, play a fake bugle in the morning and say all world-class cyclists to the starting line. And if I didn't budge, he'd then say all world-class whisses to the starting line. And at that point, I would rally, get out of bed, and we'd ride from Salinas to San Juan Bautista and back, and I don't know if any of you know how far that is, but that was a bit of a trek for an 8-year-old, but some of my best memories were having wonderful conversations with my dad. We would recite movies. We would go over Some Like It Hot, the lines from Some Like It Hot to get me through, because again, that was kind of a long ride for an 8-year-old. I don't know that my dad had a real good sense of what was child appropriate. Along those lines, my dad did introduce me to wonderful cinema. We both shared a love of Alfred Hitchcock and Billy Wilder. We also enjoyed, trusting Pauline Kael with all things movies. Pauline Kael did not sign off on it. We did not watch it. All of you know my dad was impeccably dressed. I mean, dressing down was polished cottons and a cashmere sweater, tasseled shoes, and another sweater over his shoulders. But I always was very proud that my dad didn't just wear jeans and a t-shirt. And I always thought it was pretty cool that most of the time he was in a 3-piece suit. The greatest compliment my dad ever gave me is he told me hey, I was a wonderful mom. Hopefully my kids would concur.
We do.
At any rate, miss my dad.
Let me just say, Norm's son Ken did come down last night and had dinner with us and that, but he needed to get back to Sacramento today, so he couldn't be here. But those of you who are drinking beer, that's Ken's beer, Device. He was trained as a civil engineer, was building bridges and working for a structural engineer and working down there, and he said one day, I don't want to do this anymore. They moved to Sacramento and started making beer. And today he's got 3 or 4 establishments. He's sold into a distributor company, and it's an incredibly fine thing. And every time I would sit down with Norm and he'd talk about Sarah and he'd talk about Ken, he was just so proud of both of them. So I know that Ken would love to be here today and give his thoughts about his dad, but he was always, both of them were always so much in in Norman's heart and Norman's love. Yes. Next, I'm going to ask Brian and Kevin to come up. Brenda's kids, but part of the family.
First of all, let's just take a moment to recognize this amazing setting that we have here today. This is the most beautiful place, and it's one of the places I looked at for having my wedding. We ended up going out to Holman Ranch. It was a little out of my budget at the time, but this is such a beautiful place, such a classy place, and such detail to kind of make this a special night tonight. And I just want to say that sort of is very similar to what Norman and how he presented himself to the world. So I met Norman in 1988, 87, I guess it was. And I was a young, 16-year-old that had been to a few weddings with my mom. And I met Norman, and I just went, what is this guy all about? And I actually came down with some friends, and when you're in that teenage, whatever folk you're in. And Norman had this cool car, Morgan. And my friends and I needed a ride to the Grateful Dead show, which is over at the Laguna Seca. So Norman said, you know what, I'm going to take you guys. And so I got in the car with him. And this guy, I don't know if anyone's been in a car with this Ferrari, or he had something to prove in that thing. In the morning, we flew over, I think we came over, we didn't go up one, and we kind of came over, whatever that pass is over there, past up. Oh, really? And he was driving like a maniac. And I looked at my friends, and they were like so scared. I'm like, this guy's cool. And really, that was really, after that, we had a wedding in the backyard. This gentleman married Norman and my mom. And I just think back and I go, Norman was someone that came in, saw a couple probably young punks and just thought, well, you know what, I'm going to do my thing and be myself, let them do their thing. I'm not going to judge them. I'm going to support Brenda, and I'm going to balance her out, because I think that's what he did. Yin and yang there. But, Norman was just there. He was so just willing to do whatever, Brenda wanted to do. And he cruised around the world. He came to visit us in Kuala Lumpur. He came to Vietnam and visited us. Always with, no judgment, happy, ready to play some tennis or have a bourbon or just listen and tell a joke. You guys have heard plenty of jokes, which half of them I can never remember, but you always remember the joke and finish it with a great punchline. And he's just someone I looked up to and respected. I lost my dad when I was 23 years old. And he was just someone I could come and bounce with. He always bounced stuff off of. He was always someone who was willing to listen, ask questions, ask about how I'm doing, how's work going, all those things that, as a young man growing up, it's nice to have some of that stuff happen. So I just want to say that we missed Norman, and we had some amazing years. He had just a great sense of purpose and well-being, and I don't know what else to say, but I love him and I'll miss him, and I'm just happy for the years we have with him. And it's nice to see all of you guys here. And I will just say, again, recognize the people that have taken care of him the last 2 years have been tremendously difficult. People like Roz here, who you've done so much for him and for Brenda. And thank you for everything. And of course, Cindy and Richard, and many other folks here that have helped out through the last couple of years. It's not been easy. So thank you for all the support. It's nice to see you. We'll have to catch up here a little bit.
Well done. So kind of piggyback off of what Kevin was saying, first and foremost, thank you for everybody that has made the trip down here to Carmel, whether you live here or whether you travel to be here to support our family in celebrating Norman's life, because it was a life worth celebrating. I mean, let's let her be no doubt. in the spirit of Norman and his dressing etiquette or ethic, I would argue that I'm probably the better dressed out of the two of us. You guys be the judge. No contest. You look like Norman, you just need tassels on. All kidding aside, obviously, my brother mentioned that we lost our father at a very young age, and Norman was never a replacement for our father, but he was an amazing influence on our lives in terms of just being a support, helping us out. I mean, it was like a revolving door of people that were moving in and living with him, whether it be Richard or me or whoever. I mean, everybody. There was always an open, Jennifer, there was always an open door there. And Norman was very supportive of that. And we all know that's Norman, because Norman pretty much did whatever Mom told him to do.
But he kept her in check.
His politics.
But yeah, except for his politics, but you know what? In any event, Norman was really impactful for my life because I took a few years to kind of find myself, and they were formative years for me, and I had my kind of ins and outs in terms of being in trouble or being a good kid, whatever it was. But he was always there to support me and always welcomed me into his home, and I can't thank him enough for that. Norman was more than a stepfather to me. He was a friend. And I always thought of him as that, and I'm so sorry that the final years of his life were so miserable, because I literally watched my friend suffer, and that was no fun. So, in a lot of ways, the way that I'm kind of approaching this is I want this to be a celebration. It's not a mourning. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to all remember lost connections, people that we haven't seen in 10, 15, 20 years. It's just a great opportunity, and I'm sure Norman would be very, very pleased and happy with what we're doing here. To Ken and Mike, to Mike and Sarah and their children, to Ken and Melissa and their children, I just want you guys to know very, very strongly how much your father meant to us. He was a truly blessed man, and he will be missed. So anyway, I just want to thank everybody for being here, and thanks for hearing us out.
So Norman and Brenda, he was never a question of Norman's
Mike's off.
Mike is off. That must have been one of those two kids. Is it okay?
Bring it forward. We dropped the mic. No.
Hello.
No.
I'll try this one more time.
No.
Fly me to the moon. Hello. I think we're here again. But it was, we're all one family. Just like this world should be. We're all one family, taking care of each other. And that was what they were all about. That's the way I was with them, and that's the way all of you were also. So, moving on, Brenda's brother, his daughter, Erica and JM, you're next up here.
Hi everyone, I'm Erica, Brenda's niece. That's my dad. And if you called the law offices of Anthony and Murdoch sometime in the early 90s, you might have heard my voice, because I spent many spring breaks and summers down working in their law firm. When I called so I'm the oldest of three girls, I called my middle sister, so this is her words are in this toast with me. But the words that we both have said are reliable, funny, elegant, dependable, kind, and sweetheart. And Brenda and Norman really were second parents to us. We spent almost every vacation weekend down here with them. This was our second home. And there's a good amount of chaos in our home, and they were just, you were just there. And it was safe, and it was dependable. And Norm just always had a joke for us. And I still can only draw one cartoon to this day. It's his little Frenchman, if you remember it. never learned, mastered the Donald Duck that he used to draw. And he definitely always had jokes. Someone in this room will remember the pigeon shit toothpaste joke that I still wish that I could remember, but he told it over and over during that period of time, and it was just so funny. I'm immensely grateful to him that I was able to, both on my own as I got older and I came down and visit, as our family got the opportunity to just be a part of their lives together. I've been reflecting a lot on his loss since January, and I don't know that I am a mom of 3 and a 6-year-old girls, but I'm not sure I fully understand how important it was to be in a household that was just healthy, and a marriage that was devotional, and just watching the two of them have a heck of a lot of fun together, whether that was ballroom dancing or tennis or cars. And that was just really, really special. Norman and Brenda also came to visit me when I was in Italy at the end of my junior year abroad, and we were standing in the main piazza in Florence, and I didn't actually know this car race was happening. It's a very famous car race throughout Italy called the Mille Miglia. And it's a 1,000-mile journey that goes through northern Italy. And of course it happened on the day that we were there and Norman was there. And we were standing next to this older Italian man who said something, and I translated, and it was, because a Ferrari had just gone by, a number of Ferraris had just gone by, and he said, "It is not noise, but music to my ears." And I was just like, Norman is the perfect person to appreciate this with. So it's just really, so many childhood memories are filled with the two of them, and I'm really going to miss him. And I forgot to bring my glass of water up, but I would like to raise, if you all could, raise a toast to Norm, and we miss you.
I am Jay, I'm Kevin's brother. And segueing off of Kevin's comment, she found a keeper in Norman. And to the end, to the last breath, the last few months we're trying. And watching that, Brendan was an inspiration. I know wherever Norman is, he says thank you. And some of us, possibly all of us, one day will go through this process. And I just want to say, be like Brenda.
Now, there's going to be a celebration, but I have to tell you, I'm going to cry. So, I'm just one of those grown-ups who, he was just such a dear friend. There's no way I'm going to get through this process without my tears of joy in doing this. The Berner family are here in Mass to remember Norman and commiserate with all of us. And I'd like to ask Georgia to come up. Brenda's sister.
I'm Georgia, Brenda's older sister, and I'm not quite part of the younger generation, so I have a yellow piece of and I'm almost as old as Norman was, so But Norman was a gift. He was a gift to all of us, to me, and I'm representing my 4 children, Michael, Leif, Miranda, and Jennifer, and their families, to Brenda, Brian, Kevin, and their families, and to all of us. Norman was a gentleman, and he was a gentle man. I found a quote that I liked. Being male is a matter of birth. Being a gentleman is a matter of choice. Putting my children's words and my words together today, Norman came into our lives. He was steadfast. He was non-judgmental and kind, witty, really droll, calm and calming, matter of fact. That was our Norman. He adored cars and completely adored my sister Brenda, Auntie Brenda. Norman did not think the way other people think, which was also a gift. He loved his children and grandchildren, and great tweeds, ties, shirts, shoes, a good bourbon with Jim and Richard, and his son's wonderful beers, and really good food. I remember one time on a trip to Italy in a small village on a backwater street, we ate in a cafe, and Norman ordered a ravioli, which I would not have done. It was sublime. It was not American ravioli. It was Italian ravioli. And I always paid attention then to whatever Norman ordered, because it was going to be better than whatever I chose. He was also, as mentioned earlier, a charming cartoonist for the children. And he and I shared a love of the New Yorker. Of course, part of his was Pauline Kael and the movies. Norman knew more about movies than anybody I've ever known. And he got me interested in photography, which I was never interested in. I've always been more in the painting world, not the photography world. One funny story, Jennifer's daughter Zaylee, much earlier than most children, learned to blow her nose. And that was because Norman blew his nose with a great big honk. And Zaylee, little 1-year-old, laughed and laughed and learned to do the same thing. She thought that was wonderful. So, dear Norman, we thank you, we love you, we miss you, and we wish you Godspeed.
I'm sure we all have friends from years and years past that we've stayed connected with on and off over the years. I had the good fortune of, I would say hooking up, but I understand that's not a word I should use in today's generations. But meeting a couple of my really close friends from high school that we were tight then, and didn't see each other for 40 years and have reconnected in that way. There's a gentleman here that's come down from Seattle to be a part of this celebration who's been Norman's friend since the 3rd grade. And he can speak to a lot of things. Let me welcome and introduce to you Joe Samuels.
Thank you. I have seen the origin of every story that we've heard here tonight. Everything, the cartoon, the Donald Duck cartoon that Norm did when he was maybe 3rd, 4th grade, he had perfected that. He had a subscription to Donald Duck comics. We started out, that was one of our passions, reading comic books, and it has evolved over the years. Photography, I saw the origins of that. And the origin of his interest in being sort of dapper, and even at a young age, I'm very familiar with that. Everything that we've heard about, and I was witnessing the early part of that, and I knew very well and appreciated his parents. And the origin, particularly of the automobile, I'm talking way back in the 50s when, every year it was the big deal. The new cars came out, it was Detroit's new cars, everybody wanted to see it was all visual, kind of what's it going to look like. Norm was all over that, and we talked about it all the time. And the thing I want to point out about the cars, it started, well, I had an MGA, which I got very early, and Uncle Ryan was a car enthusiast, and he helped me buy one just between high school and college. So that was a sports car. And then Norm's dad, Gus, a wonderful gentleman who knew everything mechanically about vehicles that you could imagine. He loved them, and he was one of these people that could look at a carburetor, like an SU carburetor, side carburetor in a sports car, an English sports car. He could just look at it and know how it worked. He was so appreciative of the, like a fine watch in his mind, because this had a lot of good parts in it. He loved it. He saw that car, and when we talk about sports cars with Norm, it started with a Triumph, TR3, way back in the 50s. That his dad really got into those things. He loved it. They had a Sunbeam Alpine. They had a 2014 sort of a Porsche hybrid car that they drove. The origins go way back there, and the love of cars, and I appreciate the fact that his dad was such, that was one thing they especially together had. His dad loved to go, as he retired finally, and only for a few years, was going up to Tahoe, and stuff in a sports car, and he just loved cars, and I see that, obviously we all see that in Norm. So that is a story that's at the beginning of films, appreciation for, we made a film. Norm and I had a 8mm Kodak thing. We did animation. Norm starred in the first 50s, going to the moon, and he had a space suit. Wore that. We filmed rockets taking off. We simulated exactly what actually eventually happened with a space station and with a lunar lander. We did a stop action photography with models. Oh my God. It was 200 feet long, 8mm film. About 15-20 minutes of film, which is all lost to posterity now. We should survive, because I think it was, we had nobody to show it to but our parents and a few friends. They didn't know what to make of it, but it turned out to be very accurate. It showed the lunar landing, it showed all kinds of space station, everything was in it. And I really, we put a lot of work into that. And so that was an origin. You name it, everything we've heard about this evening, I saw the origins of. And I've stayed in touch all through high school. We went in different directions with, college and beyond. And I would come down to California. I've been up in Seattle for over 50 years, but we'd come down occasionally. Try to stay in touch, which we did. Norm was very close to my parents. I knew his parents really well. The origin of everything you heard about, and some, I could speak to that, but I'm not going to go any more into that now. So I miss Norm. I'm sad because we have a place here in Carmel now that we come to more often, more recently, but it's not with us yet. I miss that, opportunity that's lost. But anyway, anybody wants to know anything about anything that's happened earlier? I'll be available to talk about that. That's
yeah, 30 years? 33 years. It's about how long they've been married too. But the law was an important part of Norm's life. We actually went to law school together, didn't know each other that well during that period of time, but I was on the S section of the alphabet, he was on the A section of the alphabet. We never met in between back in those days in doing that. But the law was very important to him. He's made a lot of friends. A lot of his friends from the legal community are here. And they were very, very, very close. My colleague, John Phillips, were on the Superior Court together for a long time. Very good friends with both Norman and Brenda. And I'd like to ask John to come up and speak a little bit about not only his friendship, but for the legal community itself.
Thank you, and thank you, Brenda and Rich, for allowing me to say a few things. I knew Norman, it's easy to figure it out, I knew him for 51 years. I came down here when Bill Curtis, some of the old timers will remember, when Bill Curtis was elected, there was a big vacuum that came in the DA's office, and so a number of people left on the peninsula side, and so I came down for an interview. Well, Bill Curtis wasn't too impressed with me, which says something for him. And I didn't hear from him for a week and a half, and then they called, Tom Kennan and Ed Barnes called and said, why don't you come back for an interview? And I came back and I ended up getting the job. I didn't realize in the meantime that Michael, Anthony, and Lindsay had all left, and so there was literally about 3/4 of the office had gone, and they were desperate to find someone to replace him. And so it was kind of ironic that about 6 months later, the first felony case I ever tried was against Norm, and I had a very strong case, which was good, but and everybody had heard about what a great trial attorney he was, and so I was obviously a little intimidated, and his client didn't look good. In fact, Jim Michael came by when they were trying the case, and the guy had a black shirt on and a black tie and a black everything, and he said to Norm said, you got any suggestions? He says, yeah, put a tent over him for the entire trial. And like I said, I had a real strong case, but I never seen anybody that could take something and nothing and make it look like something, and all of a sudden he was bringing up reasonable doubt, and I was scared as hell I would never win that case. Norm and I got to be friends, him driving his Morgan, and then he found out I was into cars, and one of the cars I was restoring was an MGA, and so then we got to know each other through car stuff. But I really got to know him when I went on the bench after Rich did, and all the other judges hate family law, and frankly, I liked it, and I thought we did some great things there. And I gotta say, I've never seen anybody better at family law and a better attorney than Norm was. He was always well prepared. He had a good common sense and judgment and could get cases resolved. And we had such a great department then with Sam and Denise and Parney and McClure, and I mean, we had such a great department, and we got things done because the attorneys, and he was probably the best of all of them that helped us get the things and get the cases resolved in a way that saved the family and caused the least amount of damage to done. So the last time I saw him, I think it was at Dave Parney's service, and we were talking about one of the funniest things that happened in our in my court, and it was I had the law and motion calendar, and for those of you who don't know, when the family law and motion calendar when you don't control it and it gets out of hand, you got a mess on your hands. All of a sudden it just blows up, and it happens to all of us, but it's happened to me more times than I like to remember. But you used to be able to keep it controlled. So I made the big mistake of calling this big case. They had Norm Anthony on one side and it had Sam Lavarado on the other side. And it was the first case I called, and it started escalating and it started getting out of control. And I'm looking around and they're posturing and they're on a roll, you know, and I'm thinking, I'm blowing this calendar. This is a mess. It's going to screw up my racquetball game at lunch. It's going to screw up my settlement conferences in the afternoon. My whole day is going wrong. And so Norm was really cranking. And then Sam gets up and he says, I don't know who he's talking to. He's looking, waving his arms. He's looking up there. I don't know whether he's talking to you, to God, you know. And I said, Mr. Lavarado, do you really mean to infer that there's a difference here? And that broke it. Norm started laughing, and then the whole courtroom started laughing. Even Sam got a little control of himself, and we got it resolved. But we had, looking back, we had some really good times in the family law department, and I had, I think, the finest attorneys around, and one of them was Norm. I saw the Ferrari out here. It reminds me, during the course of working with Norm and Brenda, I always took the position that Brenda really should make sure that Norm has a Ferrari. And so every time she would come around, I would start harassing her. Well, what woman doesn't allow their husband to have a Ferrari? You know, so she called one day, how many years ago was that, Brenda? She says, we're getting, be over at, we met, I don't know where we met, but I drove my old Mercury over, and she said, we're going to surprise Norm with a Ferrari. I know Rich was there when we drove up. And so Brenda and I drove the Ferrari up, and I remember that smile on his face, and kind of questionable smile on his face when we drove up. And I'll always remember that smile on his face when we drove up in that Ferrari. He was a great man, great attorney. It was a real pleasure to work with him all those years. So thanks again for letting me say a few words.
As I alluded to previously, and I first met Brenda and Norman through the family law court. And we were professional friends during all that period of time. I know I did one case with Norman where he was representing the man trying to get custody of the kids, and I ruled against him. And I think he never forgave me for that. He always used to say, you judges, you never do me that. And we can continue to go on, but we became to be pretty close professional friends during that period of time. And around 1988, they asked if I would preside over and perform their marriage ceremony, and I did in their backyard on 7th Street at that point in time. And it's where I met most of the family and all the folks at that point. And since then, we became the best of friends, never looking back in the process. A few years after that, when I was divorcing and had split up with my wife, I had no place I could think I could go, and was talking with Brenda and Norm, and they said, well, Norm's mom, Mabel, had just moved out, and they had the granny unit that was prepared for her, and if I wanted to stay there for a few weeks. It's okay. It's a good mom. Yeah. Stay there for a couple weeks. It would be okay until I found a place. So like the uncle that came to dinner, 6, 7 years, I don't know how long I stayed there, but I was at least, I think it was 6, 7 years that we were there. And, you know, we couldn't have been closer. Now, Norm did a lot of things, as you probably heard today. One of the things I didn't do was cook. He made the most impeccable bowls of oatmeal. And I mean, they were amazing. I got up in the morning, but
Another story.
stuff in it, but
Brenda could do.
generally okay. Salads, she was great on salads and stuff, so I came in and I've been cooking a lot at home and doing all that stuff, so I cooked a lot for them and we ate together seemingly almost every night. Norm would get up with me and I'd drag him out and we'd go hiking Soberantes and or down the coast and that. I even got him to take up golf for a while. It didn't last too long. He really wasn't his main interest at that point in time, but we played a little golf and just did a lot of things together. And from my perspective, during some of the hard times that I had, they were always there, both Brenda and Norman, to give me a shoulder to cry on, to buoy me up when it was necessary to do so, and to always be the closest of friends. And it came to a point in time when it wasn't just a friendship, we were a family. And I think that we've always considered ourselves as a family together. And we just did everything during that period of time. So I was going to think about something I could do that would be unexpected for Norm, that he'd say, okay, Rich, that was great. So I said to myself, I'm going to listen to Fox News for an entire day. It only lasted about 3-4 seconds. And I couldn't take it anymore, so I figured I had to find something else to do. And, everybody's talked about Norm being an impeccable dresser. I mean, he just was. There's no question about it. So I did shine my shoes. Not quite like Norm would do it, but I figured, well, that's close in doing that. And I thought to myself, what are the 3 things that to me best captured the essence of Norm? First was his smile. When you watch these pictures coming up, look around at some of the pictures that we've put up around the way, he just had this captivating, wonderful smile that just made you feel good in doing that, and just sort of blew away the storm clouds in doing it. The second thing that I mentioned was, again, his attire. He was the only guy I know that owned his own mangle iron. I would get up in the morning, come down the steps, he'd be watching the news or watching a movie or doing something, and he'd be ironing his underwear, ironing his t-shirts, ironing everything. I mean, it was just, it was just him. It was him and his appearance, and it was just so important to him in many ways. And you know, I am what I am. So it's okay. And then the other thing we all talked about is his love of cars, and I appreciate the stories that Joe told and how it all developed and doing that sort of stuff. I started with the Morgan, morphed into the Ferrari. So, you know, one day when the Italian Concorsio was still out in Carmel Valley, Norm entered the car in some fashion so that he could go in and park it and show it with the other Ferraris that were there. And so I hopped in the car with him. We got up early in the morning. We drove out there and we parked in this spot. And I got out and I looked around. It was 5,000 red Ferraris. And they all looked the same to me. Everyone looked the same. I says, Norm, this is crazy. If I walk 5 feet away, I'll never find it back to your car. And he said, just wait, Rich. Just wait. And honest to God, Ferrari lovers would come walking up down the aisles. They'd stop at his car, and they'd just go, wow, this is the best car out there. And I'd look around and say, how is it? But his stood out because he treated that car as part of an extension of himself. And I think that just, it rose above everything else in that promise. And he finally came up to me at the end of the day and said, "I told you so." So he did love all of those things. There's no question about it. I think I lived with Brenda Norman almost longer than anybody. And when he looked at me, gave me a smile, he had those big eyes. It was clear to me during all these years that he loved his cars, he loved his wife, he loved all of you folks and his friends. And he was truly a friend for all of us, in need and in deed. I incredibly miss him. And he'll always live in my heart and in my soul and in my memories. He was, as everybody here has said, a man of so many talents, but of so much love for everybody.
Thank you.
And now my close friend for almost forever, Brenda.
I sort of do. But she can't reach that. So we are here because everybody in this room are an important part of we're an important part of Norman's life, particularly Sarah and Ken, and Brian and Kevin, and their families. And one other person that's part of our family is Ross Bailey. She worked for Norman and for me for the last 34 years. And there's a saying that I have on my wall that is on a plaque, and I hung it there. And it said, it's author unknown, I guess. Life is not a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." It would have been 34 years. Who would have thought I was capable of that? Well, Norman did. And he believed in me, and he loved me to the fullest. Although the last few years were quite difficult for him and for me and for all of us, he continued to light up literally every time I walked in the room. Throughout our marriage, we worked together, we lived, loved, laughed, danced, played, and enjoyed our families and our friends. We could and did often proclaim, "What a ride." I do miss and will continue to miss that ride with him. Norman and I particularly, and Joe did not know that there was a thing about the moon in your movie, but maybe that explains it, but the two of us loved the moon. We would often go outside to gaze at it, and we got special joy wherever we were, wherever we went, and whether it was in our own backyard, the beach, Lake Tahoe, Yosemite, Italy, or other parts of Europe, Southeast Asia, anywhere. And the reason for that is because the moon is always there. It is fitting that Norman's last ride was on a full moon. And I hope that every time you see a moon, you will think of Norman. I know that I do and will do that. Norman Anthony, I love you to the moon and back.
process of passing around the shot glasses. I hope they won't forget me. You know, it's a bourbon that Norman loved. I don't think I mentioned. It's called Angel's Envy, and a pretty apropos name for today in this process. We're going to set up, if it's ready to go, the little presentation in song. It's called The Parting Glass, that Cindy has put together. And at the end of it, we're going to toast to Norman.
Of all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company. Of all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Of all the comrades that e'er I had, they're sorry for my going away. And all the sweethearts that e'er I had, they would wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and I'll softly call. Good night and joy be with you all. A man may drink and not be drunk. A man may fight and not a pretty girl and perhaps be welcomed back again. But since it has so ordered been, by a time to rise and a time to fall, come fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Come fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all.
To Norman.
You're here.
Thank you all.
Thank you.